And welcome into another episode of Denmark and Marsh. It is June 7th on this Friday morning in 2024. Hope everybody's been having a good week and has a good weekend as long as they are listening to this podcast. I'm Dylan Denmark, and Graham Marsh will be beside me here in a second. We were supposed to start this thing about 8 o'clock, but Graham usually rolls in about 5-10 minutes late. He's about 20, and I have no idea where this is about to go. You said you wanted to share something.
Yeah, I popped in very late, and I said, I've got a story for why I'm late. And
Does it involve drugs?
It does not involve drugs.
No drugs, so I don't care. So what is it?
Does it involve drugs? No, it does not involve drugs. So normally, as you can see, I got my energy drink here.
Yeah, your water mixed with sugar.
Yeah, I'm a big energy guy, energy drink guy. Big energy guy too, high energy guy typically, unless it's this time of the morning until I get my energy drink, and then I'm low energy. But so there's a Dailies right by my house. Dailies Dash, pop in, get there, friend of the station. So I pop into that Dailies all the time. Love that Dailies, and get a drink, get a sandwich, whatever. And I go in, normally pop right in, grab a drink, takes me less than 60 seconds, and I'm back on the road, right? So I do my normal thing. I get back in my car, and I'm parked up at the front because I didn't need to get gas or anything, obviously. Get in my car, put it in reverse. The beer truck comes in right behind me, pulls up, and parks and blocks me in. Doesn't move for 10 plus minutes. And I'm just blocked in the whole time. So I'm just sitting there like, come on, man. And the reason I didn't text you that I was running late, like running later than I thought, because I did text you that I was running late, but like the reason I didn't text you I was running even later is because I thought surely at any moment he's going to move.
Right. Hey, my bad. Come on.
Sure. Because here's the thing, man. It's not like the way he parked, he just blocked me in. It was the whole front row of cars. It was like 8 cars blocked in. And I think there was like 3 of us trying to leave. I'm like, dude, like what? And this is like a pretty spacious Dailies, by the way. Like the outside, there's plenty of space for him to move. And it wasn't like he was getting out and unloading and stuff, because you're not going to do that right there where you're blocking. And I was like, what is bro doing?
So he basically parked there to get closer to the front door?
I guess, but I mean, he's obviously there to stock the beer shelves, because it's the Busch Light truck, but I think they have like all the stuff in there.
Yeah, they got all kind of Anheuser. Yeah, it's all that stuff.
Yeah. And I'm just like, because normally I've seen him there before. I've seen the same truck there before, but it's typically off to the side, and he and the other guy that are with him, they'll unload and then they'll bring everything inside. And I'm thinking that's what they're doing. So when he pulls up, and I'm thinking, all right, he's just gonna drive right past me and go to their little spot in the corner they normally park in. Bro just stays there. I'm like, what's going on? So yeah, that's why I'm extra late. I'm always late. I'm like perpetual late guy. I know most people hate that guy, and I get it. I suck. I understand. But today was extra bad because of this.
All right, understood. Back to our regular schedule programming. I wanted to hit on the future of what I think college football recruiting is going to be like now with the NIL being passed. Not just in the state of Florida, but I don't think people will know that NIL is passed in 36 different states now. So it's going to be passed in pretty much every state sooner than later. So I want to talk about what high school kids and the recruiting process I think is going to look like in the next couple of years. And then we're going to get into Mr. Porzingis and what he did last night in the NBA Finals in Game 1 and him just going off.
Killer Kristaps, man.
Yeah, geez. I mean, it was... I'm trying to watch the game and be entertained, and I was like, all right, this is pretty much over. So, Graham, you know, I coach high school football.
I do.
I
did know
Slappy High School Football out of Baldwin. We call it B-Town. 3 square miles, by the way, if you don't know.
3
square miles, like 2 stoplights, 2 truck stops, McDonald's, and that's it.
Does Baldwin count as a city? Like, is it Baldwin, Florida, or is
it's Baldwin, Florida? It's in Duval County. It's a town. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Okay, but
so it's in Duval County, but it's its own town.
So when you're in Baldwin, you're technically not in Jacksonville.
No, you're in Baldwin, Florida.
Okay, got it.
So we all remember a couple years ago during COVID in California, they didn't play football in the fall of 2020. So a lot of the good kids, there was that was reported, it was about a dozen of them. They're like, hey, I can't play high school football. Let me play somewhere. So you had teams from Georgia. You had a couple of those kids go to North Carolina, and they went all over anywhere where they could have played high school football in the South. Now with NIL, and you're seeing kids transferring like every other season now, regardless, even in the city. What I think you're going to see now is the donors of these collectives and anybody with big money, they're going to get in bed with these high school teams, these high school coaches, and specifically these high school players. And what's going to happen is all of the best players in each city, not that this isn't happening already, but it's going to happen to a higher degree, are going to go to just the best schools in the city. So, for example, if you're Miami and you're the University of Miami, it would make no sense for you not to go to Chaminade and Miami Northwestern and American Heritage and St. Thomas Aquinas and get in bed with those teams and get all the high school prospects to say, hey, come to these teams in high school. We'll give you money. And that way you can already have a relationship with them. And then you can already, I'm sure, find a way for them to come to your school. I think that's what high school recruiting is going to end up coming to. So basically, any city that's around the school that you go to, I think you're going to know pretty much that kid is probably going to go to that college.
So remember when Ron Zook was at Florida and he was such a great recruiter? He wasn't a great coach, but he was such a great recruiter.
Yes. Couldn't beat he always beat his rivals, but didn't win. He lost the games he should have won.
Yeah.
That was his knock.
A little Muschampy in that way.
Yeah.
Well, Muschamp won a lot of big games, but he lost a lot of bad games too. It's kind of a similar thing. But the reason Ron Zook was such a good recruiter was because he had excellent relation. He's like, by the way, if no one's ever listened to like a Ron Zook interview, he's like the most likable guy ever. He's like really nice, like very charming, like cool dude. And that showed itself in the recruiting era when he was kind of more of a bigger player as a coach here, and then he went to Illinois afterwards,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, Juice Williams and Rashard Mendenhall. Had a couple good teams.
So, but when he was at Florida, the biggest reason he was such a great recruiter was he absolutely dominated relationships with high school coaches. And you being in that world understand how important that is. A lot of people I don't know necessarily know how important that is. I think if you really follow recruiting, you get it. But a lot of people might just think that, might not understand how big of a middleman the high school coach is. But you have to understand a lot of these kids look up to their high school coaches as like father figures, and they make giant influences in these kids' lives. And if you expect to win over the kid and have them commit to your university, you better have their high school coach like and trust you. And that's been true for forever, regardless of NIL, right? And again, back to the Ron Zook thing. Ron Zook, high school coaches adored Ron Zook across outside of the state, but really inside the state. Like the state of Florida loved Ron Zook. Now, to get back to your point about it, there's monetary motivation there, right? A negative is I think you can kind of cut out the high school coach a little bit here, because if you are paying the kid a certain amount of money, even if the high school coach is saying, hey, I don't know about this program, I don't know where they're going to be in a couple of years, I don't know my feelings about this guy. If you're getting paid and influence, that might change. That is the first thing. That's the negative side. I don't know if it's a positive side, but just kind of just a thing is exactly to your point. Why would you not, particularly in the talent-rich areas close to you, the state of Florida is probably the best example in the country. Why would you not have a stranglehold on those athletes and kind of build that kind of pipeline year after year to where the best athletes at that school typically Because to your point, at St. Thomas Aquinas, if you're one of the best players at St. Thomas Aquinas, you're a 4 or 5 star recruit. That's typically how it works, right? Why would you not Florida, Florida State, Miami? Why would you not build this reputation that, hey, if you're like that by sophomore, junior year at those schools, somebody from that university is going to be calling you and offering you some dollar signs.
Well, and it's, like just the top of your head, who wins state titles here in Jacksonville?
Trinity, Christian. Bowls hadn't won in a while, but historically Bowls, Mandarin.
They've won one.
They won one, but it was recent. So
right,
and
then University Christian.
UC, yeah.
So those are 3 private schools. What's going to end up happening here in Jacksonville is going to happen is, I think, if this is going to be the case, all the private schools, and then they already dominate, they're going to just continue to bring in more money, and the college coaches are going to just be with the coach and say, hey, who are the best players, and let's bring him in and see how we can build a relationship. And for anybody that doesn't think that's happening kind of already, I would advise you to watch. There's a documentary on Netflix. It's called Titletown. I don't know if you watched this, Graham. It was in Valdosta. Mm-hmm. It was based on a team that's in Valdosta. They've had a rich history of winning state championships and all that. And they took a big risk in grabbing this coach. I think he was from Alabama. And so this is right after COVID. So they get this quarterback from California. He plays the first game. And then for some reason, he's ruled ineligible. Apparently, the school didn't do the paperwork right. And then the boosters basically didn't like the coach. So they basically got the coach on a recording audio of him just talking like me and you are. And he's talking about funny money. And the coach needs more money to give funds to the families so he can house them and yada, yada, yada. And he accused Alabama and Georgia of giving the kids hundreds of thousands of dollars so they could go to that school.
Alabama and Georgia, the schools.
Yes,
not
yes,
the states.
yes. Right,
okay,
correct.
Yeah.
And then after that, a couple of kids were ineligible. They couldn't play in the state of Georgia after that season. One of the quarterbacks, his name was Amari, I forget his last name, leaves Valdosta and goes to Bradford. And then he ends up going to FIU. So that's just
Bradford, near Gainesville?
Yes, Bradford, in Stark, Florida. I think you're going to see things like that where a kid's a free agent and the parents have the money, or a college coach is willing to pay for a kid to live in the city near you. And I think that's going to happen. How many times, just look at Buchholz High School. How many kids from Buchholz High School have already committed to go to Florida in the last couple of years?
Yeah.
Like the best ones.
Yeah.
Basically almost all of them.
Yeah.
Other than you had Trent Whittemore.
The Whitmores, and his brother too.
Right. Yeah, you had both of them. The older one went to Florida for a couple of years, and then he transferred out, and the younger one left because his older brother essentially left. That was just my kind of quick thought. It's going to be the future. Not saying it's right or wrong, and I'm not going to scream in the clouds because...
No, I'll say it. It's wrong.
Yeah, it is. We see so many times where, I watched the documentary the 30 for 30 on professional athletes going broke. And I'm just going to speak for the NFL. I'm not going to speak NBA. NBA, you make way more money, just shoes and all that. Less players, more players make more money. The NFL, you're basically broke after a couple of years in the league because you're mostly 3 years in the league. Now, and that's from a 21, 22, 23-year-old standpoint. Graham, you and I are 26. Can you imagine if you had given us millions of dollars when we were 21, 22, and then now backtrack that and say, okay, now you're going to give this kind of money or maybe half of that to a 15, 16, 17-year-old?
Yeah, and I don't think anyone listening will need the explanation as to why that's bad. And then I'll also add to that it's not only is it not good for kids to make that kind of money, but look, if it was on a far smaller scale and there was some reasonable way to let high school kids just make a couple of bucks while playing ball, I wouldn't really have an issue with it. But what you're saying is the money for the top guys is going to be too much for a high school kid, for a 16, 17-year-old kid. The idea that a high school player is going to be making far more than his coach is messed up, in my opinion. And I think most reasonable people's opinions, I think, agree with that. And then also, the other side of this, and I know you're well aware of this, if you think that the only people that are going to be involved in getting this money are going to be between whatever donors from whatever school giving the money and player, you're crazy. If you think that this isn't going to have parents stamped all over it, trying to pawn their kids off the different schools.
Oh, so become a bidding war.
To make themselves money. Grown adults using their 14, 15-year-old kid, because that's when these negotiations are going to start, by the way. They're going to realize the money at 16, 17 when they're later. But if a kid is really good freshman, sophomore year, and you think these conversations aren't going to start, you're crazy. So that's how it's typical. Look at the Jaden Rashada situation. I know that's in college, but
those negotiations were happening when he was 17, 18.
And it's not just between, and these weren't just between when he was committed to Miami, John Ruiz, and then after when he went to Florida, the thing with Hugh Hathcock and everything. It's not like that was just between Rashada and school, or Rashada and collective, I should say. That was Rashada's dad pulling these strings. Man, Rashada's 16 years old. You think he's at the negotiating table sitting here? No, of course
that'd
not.
That'd be a no.
It's his dad. And that's messed up to me because there's some selfishness at play there. Are you really concerned about your kid's college career and your kid developing as a football player, developing as a student, developing as a person, and then becoming the best adult and contributing member of society and hopefully NFL player that he can be? Or do you just realize that he's a good athlete and you can make some money for yourself along the way? And look, I don't want to sit here and pretend that I'm inside of Jaden Rashada's dad's mind, and maybe his intentions are better. I'm not trying to just, he's just kind of an easy example for this right now. All I'm saying is there will be plenty of high school parents out there that are going to only look at this as a situation to better themselves and better their own financial situation. And not that that's a bad thing in a vacuum, but that ain't what high school sports is about, bro. High school sports needs to be about developing young kids into becoming good contributing members of society, whether they're great athletes or not. And the more and more we get into this stuff with NIL, and the more and more we get these guys paid money beyond what a kid that age should really be making, the more it becomes a political game, and the more it becomes negotiations, and the more it becomes transferring schools, just like you're talking about. And we're getting further and further away from actually developing kids into anything. And I think in college, people can swallow that pill a little bit more. I think in college, people can kind of understand these are really athletes at the end of the day. And as far as being students, as long as they can qualify, it's fine. High school, that's a tougher pill to swallow, in my opinion.
Yes.
A junior in high school doing this, man, like that's messed up.
And there's still plenty of kids, and this is the last thing I say before we go talk the NBA. There's still plenty of kids that are the top recruits in high school and that don't even pan out in college. I mean, we saw Tate Martell was this hotshot kid, and he was already, if you remember, whatever the documentary was on Netflix, and he was like basically calling his own play and not listening to his coach. And now you're going to incentivize this kid X amount of dollars. I mean, this is already happening everywhere else, but it's just, when you start to do these things, you empower the kid, and you're building a monster at that point.
You're not setting up a person to be grounded, motivated in the right things. So I think it's just there will be a bigger and bigger path for Tate Martell type of people, guys that have all the ability in the world, and if they're on the straight and narrow the whole time as they go really into like the back half of high school, into college, and then into the NFL, when they're developed properly, they become this great player. There's a bigger and bigger path now to stray away from that for all types of reasons. And we talked about this the other, I know I keep bringing up Rashada, but I think it's just because it's kind of it's probably the most obvious example now of sort of a high school to college bridge of someone kind of losing their way, if you will. And I'm not I'm not leaving Florida out of this. They're not blame free whatsoever. I'm just saying in terms of like kind of it's the most obvious situation of this really going haywire. Again, we talked about this. I think it was our last episode, or maybe the one before. Jaden Rashad has been all over college football headlines for like 2 years now. It's never been about him playing football. And that trickling into the high school level is an even bigger issue. Again, I don't mind them making a couple of bucks. That'd be great if they could. You played high school football like I did. The amount of time you're there, dude, it between that and school, like that is a job.
Yes.
With the amount you're there, there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with them making a little bit of change off of it. But when this type of money is what we're talking about, is it really about football anymore? Is it about development anymore? Is it about actually leading young men into something? And no, it's not.
No, it's not.
And this type of thing drove Nick Saban into retirement, bro. Into retirement. I know you saw it just like I did. Him talking about in that interview his like post-season meetings.
Yeah.
And for anyone that didn't see this, Nick said, and again, I know I keep talking about college and the whole point is high school, but it's just we're gonna see this happen.
It's already happening.
The examples we have right now are the examples in college because it's been out there a couple of years now. Nick Saban was talking about how typically in the past, because he always does postseason meetings with all his players, with every single player on the roster, they do a one-on-one meeting. It's just the player and Nick, right? And historically, the meeting has always been, okay, you're going to be a first rounder. It's probably time for you to move on. Like, congratulations, go get paid. Or like, hey, I think if you stick around another year, you can improve your stock, whatever. And if it's a younger player, it's more, hey, you're doing this well, but you need to improve in this area, and that's how you can see the field more, yada, yada, yada. Here's your development, yada. It's a developmental thing, basically. Here's where you are now. Here's how you can take the next step, whatever that may be, the next season. He said ever since transfer portal and NIL has come into play, those meetings don't have anything to do with developing his players anymore.
No, it's what the player goes to those meetings, and it's not just Alabama. It's almost every college football program. They say, hey, what can you do for me?
Yes.
What can you do for me money? What can you do for me playing time? And if not,
I'm out.
And if those answers are no, I'm going to another school.
Correct.
And that's how it is.
Correct.
And that's how it is at the high school level now, just without money.
And you just said it, talking about it's not just Bama. If that's happening at Bama, if kids are willing to leave Bama...
Dude, I know a kid that just played quarterback at an FCS school, and it was happening at that FCS school, and that's not even a major FCS school. So if that's happening there, imagine what it's like at Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan.
Right.
Way levered to higher to a higher degree.
Correct. And again, back to what we were saying a minute ago, none of this is about football anymore. Like it's just about negotiating, and obviously, it comes down to can you play or can you not. But it's just the politics, man. Like we're not setting up players to become better players, in my opinion.
All right, let's move on to the final topic. We got about 10 minutes left. The NBA Finals, Game 1 happened last night after a 1-week hiatus. I would have been way more intrigued and watched way more. Had Game 1 started Sunday, but I understand the TV networks and it's on ESPN and the family. It's on Disney and the family networks and all that, and you got to promote the ratings and yada, yada, yada. But Game 1 started, it was kind of close, and then Porzingis kind of does his thing, and then Boston kind of runs away with a 20-point lead. It kind of became a game late in the third, but then Boston goes on an 11-0 run, and then that was pretty much that.
You saw the development of Joe Mazzulla as a coach right before your very eyes last night, because last year, something the Celtics were bad about is they would get up in a game, they get lead, and more in the playoffs I'm talking about, not as much the regular season. They'd build up a decent lead, and then they'd let a team back in, kind of that same, like midway through the third type moment. And against Luka and Kyrie on their side, that can happen, right? So the Mavericks cut it to 8 about halfway through the third, and it was kind of like, okay, like we might have an interesting fourth here. Mazzulla last year, something he was really criticized for was his use of timeouts, or his lack thereof. It was that he wasn't calling timeouts in moments where it was obvious they needed one. Mavericks cut it to 8. Mazzulla calls a timeout immediately. Then they go on, I think, an 8-0 run after that. The Celtics do. And after that, game was over. And we've talked about, I don't think we've talked about it on this podcast, but I think it's been just widely talked about in general with this finals. And I think most people kind of share the same sentiment that the Celtics are so deep and so good that particularly the games in Boston, there's a path for a lot of games to look like the one last night where the Celtics blow it wide open. And that could happen multiple times in this series. And if that does, and they're probably going to run away with this thing, and they're going to win it in 5 games, maybe 6. But most people share the sentiment that if it's close late, that they like the Mavericks. Because Luka and Kyrie are probably the 2 best closers in basketball right now. So, when you looked at the Mavericks cutting it to 8 midway through the third, it was like, all right, if this becomes close, I might like the Mavericks to steal game 1. The way that the path to the Celtics winning this game is them getting this lead back up to where it just was and finishing the third quarter strong, starting the fourth quarter strong, and the game's going to be over anyways. And that's exactly what happened. And we just talked about Kristaps. If Kristaps plays like that, I mean, Celtics in 4. I mean,
you don't have an answer for that.
You can't. I mean, if the third option, third or maybe fourth, depending on how Derek White plays. Derek White and Kristaps kind of interchange, being the third or fourth guy. If your third or fourth option is playing like that, dude, you're not gonna lose.
Now we see this oftentimes where a team comes out red hot game 1 and the rest helps them. And then you see times where teams come off cold, coming off game 1.
Game 1 is typically the most misleading game of a series, for sure.
I mean, what was it? Boston beat Golden State game 1 2 years ago, and then Golden State ends up winning in 6. I'm not putting too much into what happened last night as for what happens in the series. I still think it's going to be a good series and go 6 or 7. I kind of lean Boston before, just because it just feels like their time. Like, I don't watch NBA. It just feels like they've been there. Tatum was talking about this last night, what it was like a couple of years ago. Not that the guys from Dallas having like Kyrie, but when you've been there before and, you just have that itch and you just like, you feel the pressure. There's pressure that, if this doesn't work this time around, like things are going to change. I think Boston does end up getting it 6 or 7, but I still think Dallas comes back game 2 and it becomes a lot better game 2.
It's not dissimilar from the Nuggets last year. The Nuggets last year is sort of like, all right, you guys are finally back healthy. You've got the whole thing going. You're one of the best teams in the regular season. You've got momentum. Like, Jokic is clearly the best player in the world. Like, if y'all don't figure it out now, when are you going to figure it out? And I think it's similar with the Celtics. The Celtics they've been through even more in terms of getting deep. And I've listened to a couple of podcasts about this, and I think it's true. I don't particularly like the Celtics. I don't think most people do. I think it's just Boston sports have this thing about them.
They've been dominating lately.
And
that's what it is.
Well, lately and historically, the Celtics are the freaking Celtics, man. Like, if a Boston team didn't win a championship for the next 20 years, I would not lose one iota of sleep. Okay, that's basically the way to put it. Boston sports, I'm kind of sick of it. In general, I think that area of the country has been so spoiled with success, and I'd like for some other pockets of the country that I haven't seen as much to enjoy it. But anyways, with this version of the Celtics, they have been a little bit unfairly criticized as like can't win it all type team because, when backtrack to when Kyrie was on that team and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were babies. Kyrie gets hurt. I think they were both rookies, Tatum and Brown. They go to the Eastern Conference Finals and play the Cavs. And that team overachieved pretty big time. I think that was 2018,
yeah.
I want to say.
I think they went game 7, too, if I'm not
mistaken.
It did.
And that team overachieved. And then the next couple years, oftentimes they overachieved. So they almost got punished for overachieving early because we saw them get close but not win. And this is how we talk about sports. Why can't you win? Right? And in reality, particularly in the NBA, we see it even more so. it's kind of a known thing that you have to go make 1 to 2 at least runs in the playoffs and lose and have some heartbreaking losses before you break through. That's normally how it goes for most teams. And they've done that a couple times over now. But I mean, look, Jason Tatum is our age. He's 26. It's not like he's 32 and, they go to the Eastern Conference Finals every year and can never get over the hump. Like, dude, he's still a relatively young player. Like, he's still like early stages of his prime for basketball, I would say. So I do think they've been a little bit unfairly criticized for that. That said, I don't want them to win. They're the freaking Boston Celtics, dude. I'd much rather the Mavericks win, but I think Celtics in probably about 6.
Let me throw this at you. Then I want to get to something Josh Jacobs said. I don't know if you saw it or not yesterday or the day. It was a couple of days ago. It was on a podcast. So the Lakers now are searching for a coach. UConn coach is rumored to potentially get a job, or JJ Redick. Those look like those are going to be one of the two guys that's going to get the job. Does NBA coaching even matter? Because you've had LeBron go three coaches in 6 years. Same for Giannis. Those are probably your two best stars. I understand coaching matters from a standpoint of, trying to play in late game situation. Like you talked about the use of timeouts, and I know coaching matters and knowing how to manage personalities and building a team. But it's like when you have these stars that are in total control and they can just fire coaches basically at will, I'm almost wondering like how much of importance like the Lakers' job is.
I tend to think coaching in the NBA is actually a little bit underrated in terms of, I think most of the time you see a team win a championship, like their coach in some way, shape, or form did something pretty remarkable, in my opinion. Whether that be they did a really good job figuring out strategy all throughout the playoffs, or they did a really good job developing their young stars into superstars, or they did a good job fostering an environment of selfless players or whatever. And there's things like that I think are the coach is tasked with that are actually really important. I think Steve Kerr comes to mind. I think it'd be short-sighted to say that like maybe when KD got there a little bit different, but like before KD got there, that like the Steph Clay Warriors would have won two and gone to those finals without someone like Steve Kerr kind of bringing a very young Clay and Steph into the NBA, developing them, grooming them into NBA players, and bringing a guy like Draymond in to kind of contribute to that culture. And like someone like that has been pivotal to their success. I think Eric Spoelstra is similar in Miami, like particularly when LeBron was there and they were winning championships. But even you see now, like you saw last year what they were able to do to get all the way to the finals. When they were not the most talented team in the Eastern Conference. So I think coaching does get underrated actually in the NBA at the top and when teams are winning, I think it's different. It's just different from like the way we look at like football coaches. Like it's more coaching in the NBA is more a good coach can take a second-round playoff team to a conference finals or a finals, and an elite coach could maybe win that team a championship. But I think coaches become the easiest, just kind of based on how star-driven of a league it is, coaches become the easiest scapegoat there is particularly when you got stars like LeBron, stars like guys that have been around, the guys that are vets, and guys that are going to have a lot of say-so in the organization. After a tough season where things don't go as planned,
or even if you don't even get along with them.
Yeah.
Like we saw with David Black and LeBron, it was like, yeah, I'm not feeling this guy. And then it's like, all right, you're gone. Middle of the season. Like,
and what is not getting along really come down to? Winning, right?
Or getting what you want.
Well, I mean, yeah, for sure. But LeBron could get what he wants and they could lose and he'll still blame the coach, right? If they're winning, though, they'll love that guy. Like last year, they went to the Western Conference Finals. If they're let me say this, not if they're overachieving. Let me say that. Like, last year, particularly during the season, the Lakers were not expected to be a team of consequence. I remember after, I think it was their first game, they played I want to say they played the Warriors. It was like NBA opening tip 2 years ago. Played the Warriors. Warriors smacked them around. Beat them by like 30 or something. Watching Inside the NBA after, and Charles Barkley was like, the Lakers are not a serious team. They're just out there having fun. They're just out there this year so LeBron can pass Kareem in the scoring title. They're not a serious team. They make the trades at the deadline. They shuffle some things around. And then they overachieve. They get all the way to the Western Conference Finals. And LeBron and Darvin Ham are their best buds, right? Everything's great. This year, things don't go as well. LeBron's usage has to be way too high throughout the season just for them to be able to do anything. And then all of a sudden, Darvin Ham is just the biggest idiot on planet Earth, apparently. Had Tyronn Lue, it happened with him at the end in Cleveland. Like, it's just... LeBron's kind of the most obvious example, but he's not the only one. Like you said, Giannis, like, those guys, those stars that have that type of say-so wherever they are, at the end of a season where the team underachieves, do you think the star is going to go into the owner's office and be like, yeah, it's because of me? No, they're not going to do that. They're going to blame the coach. So I think they just become really easy scapegoats when teams are underperforming. But I do think, like I said, I think in terms of getting to the top, I think NBA coaches are actually a little underrated.
Let's hit on this before we go. Did you see what Josh Jacobs said the other day about them going to Brazil and what they can and can't do, allegedly?
Nope.
So, for the ones that don't know, week 1, after the Thursday night game, forget who plays Thursday night. Was it the Chiefs-Ravens? Somebody, whoever it is. The day after,
yes, Chiefs-Ravens. Yeah,
the Friday night is going to be in Brazil between the Eagles and the Packers. So, Josh Jacobs is talking. He's like, man, we're going to go to Brazil. We're going to have fun. We're going to go to the beach, yada, yada, yada. He's like, and then we get told, he's like, he goes, we get told we can't even wear green. We're like, what? He goes, I don't know. It has to do with like some of the gangs or something. He goes, I don't know. So I did a little bit of digging. Apparently the soccer team, I don't know anything about soccer, so forgive me by any soccer enthusiast that listens to this, months down the road. There was something to do with green with the soccer team and the rival, whoever plays there in Brazil, wherever they're going to, their rival has the color of green in their uniform. And apparently when that happens, like no team ever wears green in that stadium. It happened for the World Cup, like Brazil wears green, they wore their yellow jerseys. Or Nigeria, they have green jerseys, they wore their white jerseys. And then, so Josh Jacobs goes on and on talking about this, and he's like, I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, it's the Eagles and the Packers. I mean, we both got green in our uniforms. And then, of course, the NFL, a spokesperson came out and said, these rumors are not true, yada, yada, yada. It's like, why would he say something like that if there was like no truth to that? I thought that was pretty funny, that, the NFL is trying to do everything they can to make this a global stage, and it's like we can't even get small things like this. If this is even a little bit remotely true, like, what are you going to make the Eagles wear all black and then the Packers wear white if this is the case? And then what are you going to tell the fans to not wear green because it might turn into an altercation in the stands for the people in Brazil?
I guess.
Like, that was, I heard that. I was like, I've heard a lot of things. I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I didn't know anything about that either, but I mean, hopefully it backfires. They start playing less international games.
Yeah, it won't happen.
I hate this international.
It's just
thing,
like
man.
the NBA. Once you dip your toe into the international and you see how much money you can make internationally, and you feel like, not that it hasn't happened in the NFL, but it's happened in the NBA where your domestic audience has reached its peak, in my opinion, then you got to get money elsewhere. And then you start dipping your toe in Brazil, London, and Amsterdam, and
I think
everywhere else.
It's the excuse to be able to call these extra games that would typically be kind of throwaway games in the league's eyes to like just 1 o'clock, whatever games. It's an excuse to call extra games, quote unquote, prime time. Like the Jags, when they go to London, they technically play 2 prime time games. It's at freaking 9 a.m., dude. Come on.
The West Coast is not waking up at 6:30 to watch Jacksonville and New England.
That's prime time. Come on, man.
Yeah.
But it's because it's but I mean I get it from their perspective. I mean, that game in Jacksonville or New England, would be, crowd would be at probably 60-70% capacity, and then viewership would be meh. It'd be a middle of the pack to lower pack game probably. But when you put it as the isolated game, it's a sold out crowd, and it's going to be one of the most viewed games that day. So I understand the point, but it's just annoying.
If I read this right, they still haven't even sold tickets to that game yet for tickets that they give that the NFL gives to Green Bay and Philly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's like,
hopefully those tickets aren't green.
Yeah, I mean it's June 7th, and this game takes place the weekend of like 9/11. Like, you got to start booking your flights and setting up your trips. I mean, it's not a last minute thing to fly to Brazil.
Yeah, exactly.
At least unless you're going to drive through Mexico. I don't know how that works exactly. All right, that's doing it for me, Graham, on this Friday afternoon. Hope everybody has a good weekend.
Yes, sir.
Dylan Denmark, Graham Marsh. We'll see y'all next week.